Picture this. You are crouched beside a fire. It is dark outside the circle of light. Smoke drifts into your face, and you do not move away. Somewhere, a very long time ago, one of your ancestors sat in that exact spot. Same posture, same instinct to lean toward the warmth. And at some point, one of them stopped coughing long enough to notice something. The smoke felt strange. Not bad strange. Good strange. The kind of strange you don't tell the rest of the tribe about right away. But the real answer to when this started is far stranger than a simple date on a timeline. Because smoking, the actual act of breathing in something burning on purpose, might not have a beginning at all. It might just be something that was always going to happen, the moment humans learned to control fire. Turns out, giving a curious primate access to flames was never going to end with just marshmallows. Let's start there, with fire itself. The oldest solid evidence of controlled fire comes from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, and it stretches back roughly 1 million years. Burnt bone, burnt plant matter. Fire that was contained, not wild. Somebody, 1 million years ago, figured out how to keep a fire from turning into a problem. No lighter, no matches, just patience and a very high tolerance for smoke in the eyes. And here is the detail people skip past. That fire wasn't made by us, not Homo sapiens. It was Homo erectus, a heavier-browed, smaller-brained relative of yours, sitting exactly where you would sit. Cooking, staying warm, breathing smoke. Not exactly winning any parenting awards by today's standards, but doing fine for the Stone Age. Every single night for hundreds of thousands of years, before language, before art, before anything you'd call civilization, someone was inhaling smoke around a fire. It wasn't a choice. It was just what happened when you stayed close to warmth in the dark. So ask yourself something. What was actually in that smoke? Not just carbon and ash. Burning plants release a chemical cocktail, and some of those plants carry compounds that do something to a human nervous system. Alkaloids, terpenes, chemicals your brain already had receptors for long before anyone knew what a receptor was or that they'd ever need one. Your body has an endocannabinoid system. It regulates mood, memory, appetite. It didn't evolve because of any particular plant. But it means that when the right smoke drifted into the right lungs, the brain on the other end wasn't confused. It recognized something, like a lock meeting a key nobody remembers making. Imagine that moment. Not a decision, not a ritual, just an accident, repeated often enough that someone eventually thought to chase the feeling on purpose. Somewhere out there, an ancient human accidentally had the best evening of his life and had absolutely no way of explaining why. That accident may be the true root of an industry now worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Not bad, for a bush nobody planted on purpose. Now here's where the story gets careful, because there's a difference between humans accidentally getting smoke in their lungs and humans deliberately choosing what to burn. The clearest direct evidence of intentional cannabis use comes from a cemetery high in the Pamir Mountains of Central Asia, dating to around 500 BC. Researchers publishing in the journal Science Advances in 2019 described wooden burners filled with stones, coated in the residue of cannabis plants unusually rich in the psychoactive compound THC. This wasn't wild hemp used for rope. This was chosen, cultivated, burned on purpose, in a burial, for a reason. That's about 2,500 years ago. But should that really be treated as the beginning? Organic material rarely survives. Stone tools last millions of years. A wooden pipe, a dried leaf, a woven pouch, gone within centuries, dissolved back into soil long before an archaeologist ever arrives with a brush and a very slow afternoon. Absence of evidence in this case is not evidence of absence. There's also the account of Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BC, describing the Scythians on the Eurasian steppe. He wrote of small tents, heated stones, and hemp seeds thrown onto those stones, with people inside inhaling the smoke and crying out in what he called pleasure. For a long time, historians assumed the old man was exaggerating, the way tourists do when they come back from vacation with a story that keeps growing. Then, archaeologists excavated Scythian burial mounds, bronze braziers, heated stones, hemp residue, exactly what he described, buried in the ground for over 2,000 years, waiting to make him look completely honest. He wasn't exaggerating anything. He wasn't misunderstanding a strange custom. He was just reporting exactly what he saw, in plain detail, for anyone reading centuries later to eventually confirm. Now let's talk about tobacco, because it's the plant most people actually picture. Tobacco belongs to the genus Nicotiana, and it is native to the Americas alone. It was completely unknown across Europe, Africa, and Asia until contact in the late 15th century. When European ships reached the Caribbean, sailors described something bewildering. People walking around holding small glowing sticks, breathing in smoke, letting it drift back out through their noses. Within weeks, the very same sailors who found it bizarre were doing it themselves, which is a pattern you'll notice repeats itself throughout most of human history. But in the Americas, this was already ancient. Chemical residue in pipes places tobacco use at least 3,500 years old in what is now the southeastern United States, and some researchers argue it stretches back 10,000 years or more, tied to plant cultivation deep in the Amazon basin. And this matters. It was not casual. It was sacred. Smoke carried prayers upward. A shaman blowing smoke onto someone wasn't performing a habit. He was opening a channel, treating the smoke itself as a living messenger between two worlds. This was not a smoke break. This was closer to a phone call to the divine, with terrible reception and no way to hang up early. Compare that to ancient Greek medicine, where physicians burned herbs like henbane and inhaled the vapor to treat lung disease. Hippocrates himself wrote about inhaling herbal smoke as treatment. The logic wasn't foolish for its time. If a plant has medicinal properties and the lungs absorb things quickly, smoke becomes a delivery system. We still use that same logic today, in inhalers and nebulizers. Only the burning part disappeared, and honestly, that's probably for the best. In ancient India, a tradition described in Ayurvedic texts over 3,000 years old outlines something called dhumapana, which translates roughly to smoke drinking, which sounds like a contradiction until you realize your lungs have been doing exactly that. This whole video. Specific herbs, specific pipes, specific conditions the smoke was meant to treat. This wasn't guesswork passed down by accident. It was a structured medical system, refined across generations. Across ancient India, ancient China, ancient Mesopotamia, in nearly every early civilization we have records of, someone was inhaling smoke deliberately, not for pleasure, not for addiction, because sometimes it worked. And in a world with no antibiotics, no surgery, and none of the tools you take for granted, sometimes it worked was a meaningful bar to clear. It was often the only bar available. And there's a piece of this story that rarely gets attention. Groups who shared an altered state together tended to trust each other more. Shared ritual smoke wasn't a party. It synchronized people. It built the kind of bond that let a group walk into danger together and come back alive. That wasn't recreation. That was infrastructure. Think about how rare that kind of trust actually is. Modern neuroscience has shown that shared ritual experiences can synchronize brain activity between participants, deepening a sense of group identity in ways that are measurable, not just felt. Your ancestors didn't need a lab to know it worked. They only needed to survive one more night because the group beside them held together. So here's the uncomfortable turn in this story. What took indigenous cultures thousands of years to build into something careful, ritual, and sacred was compressed into something else entirely once it reached industrial hands. Within a few centuries of reaching Europe, tobacco went from strange curiosity to continental obsession. By the 1700s, snuff was fashionable among aristocrats, who apparently needed a way to look important while sneezing. By the 1800s, cigars were everywhere, in coffee houses and drawing rooms alike. Then, by the early 20th century, the manufactured cigarette arrived, engineered to be cheaper, faster, and more addictive than anything before it. What indigenous cultures had spent thousands of years shaping into something careful and ceremonial was, in the space of a few hundred years, turned into a mass-market product. Later, entire industries would spend decades quietly burying research their own scientists had produced, showing exactly what that product did to a human body. A shaman in 500 BC placing cannabis on heated stones during a sacred burial, and a tobacco executive centuries later signing off on advertising cigarettes to teenagers both technically touch the same plant. Almost nothing else connects them. So when did ancient humans actually start smoking? Honestly, we don't know. We may never know for certain, no matter how many sites archaeologists eventually excavate. The physical evidence takes us back roughly 12,000 years with real confidence, and further still if you allow for reasonable speculation. But the underlying urge, the drive to alter your own mind, to share that experience with others, to treat smoke as medicine, is almost certainly older than any object we've dug up. It might be as old as fire itself. It might be as old as the moment your ancestors first connected cause and effect. That happened last time, and I felt different. Let me try that again. That's not addiction. That's intelligence, doing exactly what it evolved to do. Your ancestors weren't reckless. They were running the very first experiment of its kind, without a lab coat in sight. By the time anyone started writing history down, in every corner of the inhabited world, humans were already finding ways to put smoke into their bodies. The plants changed. The reasons changed. The behavior never really did. There's something oddly moving in that. You have phones now. You have medicine your ancestors couldn't have imagined. You have more information available in one pocket than an entire ancient library could hold. And yet, underneath all of that, there is a thin, unbroken thread running back through every one of those centuries. Fire, smoke, breath. So the next time you catch the smell of wood smoke on a cold night, understand what's actually happening. You're not experiencing something new. You're doing the oldest thing your species has ever done. You're breathing.